Hello, Recursive Community, again here from Attractos in Athens. I'm very happy about our next guest because he's someone who has made it, and he made it so well that he actually also made it going through our bank accounts. Victor Trokoudes is the co-founder and the CEO of one of the fastest growing fintech companies in the UK. Plum is a money management app. It deploys AI to help people save money and make smarter investment choices. He is living in London, but he has roots in Cyprus and a solid education from Harvard and INSEAD. Mm-hmm. He started his career on the trading floor at Morgan Stanley and later joined the fintech unicorn TransferWise in London. Following his interest in payments, he has also funded the POS, right? Mm-hmm. Terminal reseller Bluebird, which he already exited successfully. Victor Trokoudes, welcome to the Recursive Podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good also to catch you in Greece.
I know. I'm here a lot, but now here for 2 weeks. So yeah, it's good. Spending time with the company, right? Because we have half the people are here. Okay. So I regularly come.
And you also have a team in Nicosia, so you still have the roots in Cyprus.
Still build the roots there, yeah. So we opened a small Cyprus office like a year ago now. Mm-hmm. We have around 10 people there. We got regulated in Cyprus for our European expansion. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the reason the office is there. But it's also nice to be back home and have an office and get good people to be working for you in the local market. Mm-hmm.
So you were born in Cyprus, but you left Cyprus for your education, and you got actually very solid education. Mm-hmm. First Harvard, then INSEAD. How did this shape your entrepreneurial journey?
Look, I don't know if it. I don't know if the education shaped it. It wasn't back then, in 2000, I graduated Harvard in 2008. Everyone back then would go into financial services, banking and stuff like that, right? So it wasn't really that it pushed you into entrepreneurship directly. So I think the entrepreneurship thing was more a personal thing from before, or for forever in a way, right? Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even politics, as we know here in Greece, but also in Bulgaria, by the way. Yeah. Okay.
So for me the entrepreneurship thing it was from younger, right? Before I went to Harvard, everyone in Cyprus has to do the army.
Oh yes, true.
Yeah.
How long is that?
25 months.
Wow, that's long.
Yeah. So I had to do 2 years of army, and then when you do the army, you take this exam that, and you can become an officer, and your life is a lot better. You're basically in the army 5 times a month, mm-hmm. versus everyone else that's out of the army 5 times a month. Mm-hmm. But you take this exam, and I wrote a book that helped people take the exam. So that was my first little business thing, which is probably what helped me get into Harvard in a weird way as well, because clearly it was part of the application, but it wasn't intentional.
That was your first entrepreneurial experience back then?
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote and produced this book, and I was selling it in 30 stores in Cyprus. I would be driving around, giving them the books, and then they would sell it to new people that were joining the army. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started.
That's actually also a very solid experience, by the way. Yeah. Because we don't have this really, I think, at least in Bulgaria, but also in Romania, we're not really encouraged, especially as teenagers, to try something like this. How is it in Cyprus? Do people start with the entrepreneurial kind of thinking early on?
I don't know. I think maybe in Cyprus, I don't know how to track it. There are a lot of people that have their parents will have small businesses, right? So there's a lot of business owners in Cyprus, but it's small businesses, from a store to I don't know, my dad's a doctor, so he has his own practice. So a lot of people have their own practices. So I think people they think that they will earn money by working for themselves. Okay. So I think there's a bit of that, even though now it's changed. A lot of people that go back to Cyprus go to these PwC and Ernst & Young and these service industry. So it's shifted in a way. So no, but I wouldn't say there's at all an entrepreneurial mindset there at all. But yeah.
And at first, you actually also started for the big financial institution for Morgan Stanley, but then transferred to TransferWise. Mm-hmm. I wonder, how did your experience in the world of finance led you then to a more entrepreneurial kind of environment? Because you could have continued also for the big financial institutions, for the big investment banks. Probably you could have had a wonderful career. Why then change to a startup? And I mean, just to make a, like a mark that back then TransferWise was actually very in its infant shoes.
No one knew. I mean, it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't
a big thing.
No.
Okay.
It wasn't like an obvious choice. But look, I think, look, for me, like I did this little book thing, but I always wanted to do something. I feel like from a young age, it was kind of, that's what I wanted to do. And when I joined, I joined Morgan Stanley, but I joined as a trader, which was, again, very much like, you're someone that's trying to figure out what's going on in the world and take an opinion, right? So again, it's quite entrepreneurial because you're like processing information and trying to decide which direction something will go, which I enjoyed. Well, I thought I would enjoy it a lot more, and clearly after 2 years I realized it was more like playing a game, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm right, you make money in theory, but it's not really creating any value, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is I was next to these people that were working there that were there for like 20 years, let's say, and I was working in the UK government bond market, and like, they would see a bond that when they were 20 years back would like launch as a 20-year bond, and now that bond was coming to fruition. It just felt very, just very pointless, very continuous,
Lengthy,
it's just, another thing. So I think early on I realized that it was more of a game, trading, and that it wasn't what I intended, and that's when I decided to move on.
When you say value, creating value, what does this mean for you? Like, when do you feel like, by entrepreneurship we create value?
I mean, I think you create value. I think when you create something that, even if people use what you create, right? In a way, you must be creating some value because people want to use it. But for me, value is, I guess, a bit further, right? Where you change like kind of like behavior, and you move things in a better direction, right? So I think, so if you look at the world and you see things that are not good or less optimal, and you can make them better, I think that's when you create value. For me, like tech is like, is trying to take out the fat out of things, right? So there's a lot of fat in the world, in financial services especially, right?
Oh yes.
There's a lot of fat. So it feels like you create value because you're taking a process and making it more efficient, and in our case, like, better outcomes for individuals, right?
And it was also the case in TransferWise, but I guess you've learned not only about how tech can take out the fat of certain financial services, but also how to scale a company. Which, how long did you spend there?
I was there for 2.5 years. 2.5 years.
And when you started, I think there were around five people.
Yeah, 5 people.
And when you left, there were how many?
600.
600 people.
Yeah.
So you saw how to build a startup from the 5 people core team, and then scale it to 600 people.
Yeah.
What did you learn? Because I think this is like unique experience. This is not something that, especially, here in our region, we can see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Not even on a monthly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, look, I think it was very lucky to see that, and you definitely, unique experiences, I think, shape you, right? Because you get a different perspective that, unfortunately, if you don't experience it, you don't get. But TransferWise was very much a mission-driven company, right? Okay. It wanted to bring value to the world, change something, right? And by default, it employed people that felt the same way, right? And for me, when you do that, or if you're in a sector where you're actually trying to change something, right, that has a clear mission and a clear impact, I think it's almost like easier to scale the company because it's much more, you're much more aligned with everyone. Whereas if you're, I don't know, I never worked in B2B, but I can see how maybe it might be a bit more difficult because, at the end of the day, you need to make ARR and make revenue, right? So I think like what TransferWise did, it like this mission was core. It hired people that were behind that mission and gave them the autonomy to execute on it, right? So it felt easy to scale.
Okay. Oh, what was your role back then? Oh, I
So
guess it changed over time, but
Yeah, so I joined at the very beginning to do BD, which was undefined, and then basically realized that the biggest BD I could do was like open new markets. So I became head of international. So basically, I launched TransferWise in 25 new markets. So either like to send money to, or in that market getting regulated, finding the partners, and allowing TransferWise to send money out of those markets. So we launched Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, India, the US, Canada. Brazil, yeah, bunch of places.
by the way, this is something that I think founders, especially from our region, are forced to do very early on, and at the same time, it's a bit hard because launching a new market is also in a way understanding probably the culture and how the system is actually working. What did you learn, from scaling to places like Australia and then Japan, which are very, very different markets? And I know especially Japan is actually very hard because there is a lot of loyalty to the local businesses and to the local vendors, and people don't really want to change.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it depends, and I can't speak about all products in a way, right? But I think like when your product is making like a clear difference to people, and TransferWise, it was cost, right? For Plum, it's a service that doesn't exist, right? People don't automatically save money, right? It's not a product that exists.
It's a blue ocean, yeah.
Exactly. So when you go with a product like that, I think it's you're bringing something new to the table. If it's bringing value to people and is like 10 times better, as they say, or just doesn't exist versus what's there, people will use it, right? So there is a bit of a cultural element. Yes, trust, how you, especially in financial services, how you show trust, what they care about. There are like, intricacies, but if it's such a new thing and it brings so much value, you can get over those things.
Yeah, I can guess, but I would be actually curious to understand the strategy. In any case, what you have then learned from TransferWise, you then applied to your next venture, which was Bluebird, right?
No, Bluebird was started. I started Bluebird and worked at TransferWise at the same time at one point. And then Bluebird ran in parallel at TransferWise.
I see.
And then when I left TransferWise, I went back to Bluebird, and that's where we sold the business a bit, or part of the business. And then after that, I started Plum.
I see. So you applied the knowledge that you had from TransferWise and then directly to Plum.
Yes, yeah.
How old were you at this point when you started Plum?
I started Plum when I was, I think, how old was I? I started in 2016, effectively, so I was 32.
Okay, yeah. So you were actually mature enough already, and you felt like, okay, now is the time to do my own thing. Okay. Yeah. Which are the things that, kicked you into that idea? I know that there is this famous story with your dad, that it was your dad who basically inspired you to launch Plum and to design the product in this way. Can you share about this?
Yeah. Yes. So look, basically, like, I guess my dad used to invest in stocks. Okay. He was a doctor. He used to invest in stocks. So, something we discussed kind of like growing up. But then, I went and became a trader. I worked at TransferWise, but I was like kind of in like my early 30s and felt like even though I had all of this knowledge, around how to manage money and invest, I wasn't doing anything. Like there was this like negative inertia that I wasn't actually taking actions for my financial future.
So what were you actually doing? So you probably at some point you had some savings, and what did you do with the money?
I wasn't thinking about it as savings. I was just like living, right? I was living, not saving in a way, right?
Okay, so you were also spending probably.
Yeah, I was spending. I was just normally not planning for the future, not thinking about stuff like that. So that's what I was doing. And my dad was kind of telling me, you should plan for the future, you should put money and do all of these things. Yeah.
Okay, I probably need some advices also from your fund, because I'm also not
exactly.
Not there.
Well, no, but like, when they say it to you, you're like, you're right. I should be. And that's what triggered me to build Plum, right? So just build something that's almost like a button that you press, and then your financial life is sorted out.
Okay.
So that's what we wanted to build.
What is the age to start doing that, by the way?
To build a company?
Well, more to start thinking about the future and to manage your finances, you know.
Well, look, that's the point, right? I mean, in investing, there's this thing of compounding, right? Compounding interest, which means the earlier you do it, it has a much bigger impact on your life, right? Okay. Because, you know, money compounds, grows, and then it grows on a bigger pot. So you got to like kind of almost like put less money aside if you start way earlier, right? Versus waiting until you're 30 or 40 to start doing it. So the earlier the better. And that's why like the way Plum works is that like we encourage young people, you connect your bank account, you start saving. So if people should do it after when they get their first job, basically, right? When you get your first job, you should start putting some money aside, and some of that should be going into investments, and you put it there and you forget about it, and then it compounds and grows over time.
And how much one should have saved, you know, to start investing? Because I mean, we saw what happened with Luna, and I guess you can be very tending to risk, and you can take, you know, both decisions. Yeah. But at the same time, investing is it is a risky endeavor. So how do you manage that, and how do you manage that on the platform? Look,
yeah, I mean, look, I don't consider, I mean, Luna in a way, like I don't consider, let's say, an investment, right? In a way, like it's a bet.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
But look, so I think like when I talk about like, I mean, there's different types of investing, let's say, but like, you know, I think people should have like a core global portfolio of stocks and bonds, right?
Okay.
That, you know, companies grow, right? I mean, everything has to have like, you know, some logic, right? Companies grow, make more money, and their value will go up, right? Over a very long period of time, that's what happens, right? It's a fact of life, right? So if you buy the S&P 500 over a very long period of time of 10 years, it should move up because these companies become bigger. Okay. So what I mean by investing is that people should be putting some money into savings, which is accessible, right? And then some more money into like the stock market, right?
Okay.
I think you should, it's very hard to give like hard rules about what to do because everything's personal. It's how you want to live your life in when you retire and all of that. But like, I think for me, the most important thing is not to think about it as stages that, oh, I need to save this much money and then I need to start investing.
Okay.
I'd rather people like start putting a bit into investing from the very beginning to see and learn how that feels and understand what volatility means and markets go up. Put something like, you know, very small, like you can put 10 pounds a month, right? But then you get some level of commitment and then when you see the returns, then you can decide, okay, what's the trade-off I want to do between money I save for, you know, the end of the year and money that I want to save for when I want to retire. And then you can adjust how much money goes into savings and how much goes into investing. But I think you should start from the beginning and just call it an experiment, put very little into investing and see how that moves.
So, and what is the ratio that you would actually recommend between savings and, you know, the money that you would invest?
It's almost like an impossible question to answer because for every person it's different. For every person it's different. So, and it depends how you live your life and how you want to live your life in the future, right? And then there's different like rules of thumb that people have, right? But I think everyone has to find their personal thing.
Okay. How do you do it personally?
Well, how do I do it? I mean, what do I do? Like, I mean, like at Plum, we have this thing called the splitter, right? And on the splitter, I have 5% that goes into savings and 95% that goes into longer term investments. But that's, it's because I'm happy to ride the volatility. I have other savings. So on the side, so my ongoing money that I save on a monthly basis from my salary is split 5% into savings and 95% into investing.
So you're making it much more easier for users, you know, to enter those markets. I wonder also for a young person, let's say you're a Gen Z, you're in your 20s, and maybe you saved something like 300 euros. Can I actually start on Plum?
Yeah. Okay. You can invest with €1 on Plum. You can buy €1 of Apple or Microsoft or
And how do I get this kind of literacy to know, you know, where to read about the stocks? Because at some point you do want to understand them. I think especially when you have a vested interest, into that. You're starting, to get curious about, hey, how are these financial markets working? Why are certain, stocks going up and then down? And then there are some weird things happening because there is a black swan event like now.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you start as a 20-year-old person who is interested in this world? How do you get access to this kind of information also?
Look, there's clearly on the internet there's thousands of things you can read, right? So we don't provide too much information, but we will start providing more information in the platform. But look, the basic rule is the basic mindset that I think is very important is not to think that you can be smarter than everyone else, right? Especially when it comes down to investing, because there's a lot of people constantly thinking about it, and over the long run, not everyone, but people tend to make what the market makes, right? Okay. So that's why, I think the important thing is to be diversified, not think that, okay, I've read everything on this one stock, or Luna, right? I know everything about Luna. I'm going to put my money there. I'm going to put a lot of my money in Luna, and it's going to make it, right? No, you need to have a diversified portfolio, and you put money consistently in. That's also important. That's how we build Plum. Every week you invest. Every week money comes out and goes into a stock, or a portfolio of stocks, and that's important because you get in as the price goes down and as the price goes up, right? So it's very hard. You shouldn't try to pick the bottom and pick the top and buy here and then try to sell there and then buy here again, because you end up losing money. The more you trade, the more prone you are to lose money. So we're not encouraging trading. We're encouraging investing for the long run and doing dollar cost averaging, right? So putting money every week into the market.
Cool. I guess maybe some of the people who would be watching the podcast would be interested also in joining Plum, but when are you planning to launch Greece?
So so after the summer, so we just launched Belgium a few weeks ago, and then we'll be launching Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal over the next few months. Okay. We'll be announcing them as they go live.
Okay, we will be definitely looking forward to having you here in Southeast Europe as well, by the way, because I'm already thinking myself that I would prefer to do that this way.
Boom.
Because I also prefer AI managing that for me, because if I have to add that to my tasks, it's going to be just too much. This is also the other thing with investing, and also, I don't know, even buying real estate. It's just so time consuming. You have to read, you have to be careful, you have to, I don't know, I would prefer someone to manage that for me.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. That's why we have these funds that are diversified, and you choose it based on your risk level, and then you put it, and then you don't have to be deciding where the stock market is going to go, which is a bad thing to do anyway, because it's impossible.
So you mentioned that you're now focusing on Europe, right? From what you've learned at TransferWise, can you apply something in your business development strategy? And also as a CEO, how is your role now actually changing with the growth and also with the investment? Because you are probably a bit more hands-on at TransferWise. You are running, the business development strategy. But how does it feel now in the role of the CEO?
Yeah, there's two questions there, so I'll answer a bit the first one. When we launch new countries, for us, it's very important to do PR, right? And let people know that we're here and what we stand for and why
we're to create trust.
Yeah, exactly. So we always have a PR element to what we're doing, and then in addition to that, we use different paid acquisition channels to acquire users, which is something that we can still do centrally, right? Okay. So we don't have to have someone on the ground, and we have to understand the local market. But being in London, especially as well, there's a lot of people from Europe, right? So we have people on the marketing team that are French, that are Italian, that are Spanish. So it's easier and Greeks, obviously. So it's easier to market to these markets. So that's how we launch new countries. And then within the product, we also have a referral channel, right? So within the product, if you refer your friend, you get rewarded. So that also kind of self perpetuates the growth, right? So that's kind of our strategy when we launch in new markets, and then we talk to customers, we learn about what they like, we do surveys. The product managers have to really get a feel if the product is resonating, what needs to change, right? But it's a big endeavor. Even the language that you use in the product, you have to ensure that it's appropriate and you don't mistranslate stuff, etc. You can get it wrong.
True. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's how we launch countries.
And what do you plan about the growth because you need to, of course, also fund it. Fundraising right now is a bit challenging because we don't have the predictability of the financial markets. I guess the war will be, defining also how we're going to live or how startups are going to fundraise in the next months. How is it for you? Do you actually plan to fundraise again, and how do you manage the current situation?
Look, we're lucky we fundraised in November, so we have we're lucky from that perspective.
Yes.
But but it also means that, but like given we are like reacting to the environment, right? And I think like what we're realizing that we believe there's a true need for our product, but that means we also have to take steps to make sure that we're not making decisions that make us reliant on needing to fundraise very, very soon, basically, right? So we want to extend our ability to develop the product, maybe a bit slower or go slowly in order to be able to be around it when the funding environment gets better. So we're becoming a lot more focused, and we're also becoming a lot more focused on revenue, right? To make sure that we're building more of our own revenue to be more self-sustainable.
I was reading something which I found very interesting, that you don't really, maybe you do believe in them, but when you define the strategy and also the tactics with your team, you don't focus too much so on the goals and the traffic and the user growth, but you kind of encourage them to think even bigger. And this thinking big for me, I think I would like to examine it, and I would like to study it. What is thinking big for you? How do you also communicate that to your team? Because I think that in our geography we have wonderful founders who are just maybe not confident enough to have this moonshot idea and to believe that they can actually make it globally. I think we're still a bit restrained in our thinking. So how did you develop that? And what is thinking big? What does it take, from your personality to do that?
It's true. I think it's very, in a way, I think the most dangerous thing when you're launching a startup, in a way, is to think small. Because you might feel like you're able to really control things, and I'll become very good in this small area and make a lot of profit. But it means if you think small, there's a lot fewer people that are willing to take a chance on you, right? And how much they give you to take that chance is limited, right? Because theoretically, how big you can become is also limited, right? So I think it's a very it's a different type of business, right? If you think small, let's call it, you can't raise that much money, you can't build a big team, you're always thinking about the cost side of the business rather than the growth side of the business. So I think it's a kind of thinking big gives you the advantage that you can, build a stronger team, a bigger team, and you can also motivate people that are motivated by big things, right? To join you, right? Which I think is also a big important part of the journey. Now, how do you shift to thinking big? The reality is, you probably, I think local ecosystems benefit a lot if there are examples of people that, thought big and made it big, right? I think the reality is TransferWise, we keep talking about China, but I was lucky to be there. I saw someone that thought big, and it inspired me to also think big. Now, where that goes from a character perspective, I think the people that do think big are the people that I think see problems in the world, right, and want to fix them. At least that's where I come from, right? I'm like, this isn't right. This can be done better. And you want to fix them, and then you kind of do whatever you can to fix it, right? If you start a business, I want to make revenue and I want to make money and call myself an entrepreneur, it's you're more prone to failure.
Are there also many people like that in London who are in the game because of some kind of vanity?
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure there are. Yeah, I'm sure there are. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And about the thinking big, so how many people are you now at Plum?
So we're around 160, 170 people.
I guess it's easier when you're smaller as an organization to have this kind of mindset also imprinted or inspired in the brains of your employees. But when you're 170, how do you do that? Because you probably have not direct contact to a lot of the people who are in the organization.
Yeah. No, it's a shift, and I'm learning / trying to figure it out, right? Okay. It's different. It's this thing that you said, when you're smaller, you talk to everyone, you kind of know everyone, you influence by being with them, and I think now it becomes a lot more thoughtful about how you communicate, what you say, being super clear. Even the structure of meetings and like kind of like events within the business has to be a bit more intentional. So yeah, you need to build an organization where there are people that lead other groups of people, and you need to be very aligned with the group that you interact with, and then they need to be very aligned with their teams, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm used to being like kind of a person that goes and does stuff, right? And now it's becoming something that you need to think about the organization and how everyone interacts.
And how do you create most value as in your role? Yeah, I have actually the same issue, because I was also in the beginning very operational, and I would think, oh, this is boring, let me do that. I'm not going to give it to anyone else. And then at some point I got so overwhelmed with all the operational tasks that I just didn't delegate, because I felt bad about it somehow, because it's boring, Why would I delegate this? No one wants to do it, but you have to, because otherwise you're not even creating for your organization a value for your organization. Yeah, this is really challenging. And by the way, experienced business people, they share that it's very, very important who you hire in the beginning. So this core team that you're going to create, they're going to also be the ambassadors of the values that you had in the beginning to all those people who would join. At the same time, these people might not be necessarily someone who has experience in structuring an organization. So how do you leverage that? How do you? So I guess the core team is still in Plum.
Yeah.
But maybe sometimes you also need like the corporate people who know how to do all those complicated things that a startup don't really know how to.
Yeah, look, I mean, look.
What is your advice here?
A startup or a lot of organizations, it's all about like hiring, right? At the end of the day. So hopefully if you've managed to hire a good core, right, in the beginning, or like you have clarity on what you value and what these people look like, you continue to do it as you hire people that are more experienced, right? Not necessarily corporate. I mean, we still hire people from other startups that have like scaled, right?
Okay.
So yeah, we don't go to corporate for sure. But look, I mean, we're going through this transition. I mean, like since we raised the money, we've hired like a VP layer, like people that have managed larger teams, right? And they're all external. But we've taken a long time to find the people that we think fit our values and how we want to run stuff. And so far it's been good. So far we've been lucky. I mean, you never know. But look, at some points you need to, depending on who you're with in the beginning, and we were always like kind of like very like high energy, passionate people, and now we've hired a bit more like organizational people to join Plum. So we've hired a lot. We've hired these people externally, but we make sure to spend a lot of time to align and make sure they fit in and know what we stand for.
I guess it's very important. But you're still one of the fastest, or probably the fastest growing fintech startup in the UK, in London. Yeah. By the way, why is London a good place to do something like that? You mentioned one thing which I find very curious, because you said London is such an amalgam of different cultures. So when we scale to Portugal, then I can easily find someone who has roots in Portugal. And maybe also when you launch Greece, you would also use this kind of connection. Why else is London a good place to launch a fintech company?
Well, look, I mean, I guess London traditionally has always been a financial center, right? So there's always been big banks. So there's people that understand finance at its core, right?
Okay.
But look, I think a lot of people that are, I don't know, ambitious come to London to find work, right? So everyone that's there is I guess they're more focused on work, doing stuff, you know, in a way. So I think it's a combination of like you have a pool of like quite ambitious and high energy people coming to London, and at the same time you have this like kind of like history of financial knowledge with the banks that I think people feel comfortable to do fintechs there. And then the FCA, the regulator, has also been like the more progressive regulator versus other European countries in terms of like helping innovation and new companies to set up in this domain.
I guess it's also a bit easier to fundraise.
Yeah, as well.
But you still chose Greece and also Cyprus for your R&D operations. Why, actually? Because you can actually you could have gone also to Ukraine, by the way.
Yeah.
Why not? Why Greece?
Well, look, I mean, I think I'm from Cyprus. I speak Greek, right? I have a lot of good friends here. So I wanted to do it in a country where I felt like comfortable, right? And I could speak the language, and I would want to like naturally actually spend time here. So I think it's important, right? We're like one company, and I spend time here, and I spend time in Cyprus, and in London.
Yeah.
So for me, like it made sense to do it somewhere that felt like a bit like home for me, right? And that's why we chose Greece, right? And Greece is like, you know, Athens is like one of the biggest European cities, right? There's 6 million people, a lot of good technical universities. So it felt like a good place where we could find good talent.
Cool. By the way, how did the pandemic affect the business of Plum? Was it good for you?
I mean, clearly we panicked for the first month, right? But then it was good, right? Because people were spending less, so they were saving more, and they also wanted to start investing, right?
Yeah.
Because the market crashed, but then it started going up. So it was actually a very good period for us where we started acquiring a lot more users. And becoming part of the product. People became, I think, also way more aware of the risk to their finances and wanted to become more on top of it and have more savings, have more investments for the future when things can, you know, become volatile. You can be made redundant. You can be put on this. Furlough and you know, etc. So I think it really heightened, I think, the financial risk that we have as individuals, right, in this world.
Actually, most of your users are first-time investors, so most of them, they didn't even have experience before that. So I can guess that, you know, having this kind of insecurity at some point made them think probably about the future and how do I prove it?
Exactly. No, I mean, that's it. I think like our generation is going through this phase where, like, you know, people change a lot of jobs, and I think like the security either from your employer or from your government is not what it used to be, right? So you need to very much, you know, make decisions that, you know, in the future means that you will have enough money to live off, right? And I think that's a mind shift change that's happening with our generation.
Financial independence is actually a big topic in the generations, that my generation, but also the younger ones. So they would like to have the control of that a bit more in them and not to rely so much on the state.
Exactly.
And I guess this is why also entrepreneurship is a big topic. So for someone who is maybe now in her or his 20s, what would you recommend them? Because you started in the corporation, although you wanted, you know, to build your own company and to, I don't know, solve an issue, solve a problem. You then still joined a startup before you launched your own thing. Is someone who is in their 20s fit to launch a startup? What do you think?
Look, I don't think there's any rule, right, with these things, right? People people should kind of like do what they feel when they feel it, right? And go for it. And then every experience is a learning experience, right? Yeah. At least I always say, like, it's better to be it's better to be playing in the game, right? Like, so if you keep thinking I'm going to launch a startup, you can't, you don't have a startup, so you can't really do anything. Whereas at least if you have a startup and you're doing stuff, you can kind of, you can pivot, you can change the direction, you're in the game. So how you get to launching it, I mean, look, I think the experiences, I think, were useful, right? I saw how a big place works. I mean, clearly the startup I joined, TransferWise, was like, more relevant, right? So look, I don't like to give like strict advice, do this or do that, right? I think you can gain a lot, because I think every person is different, right? You can clearly gain a lot by seeing how a startup operates, right? But every startup will also be different, right? That's what you realize. So I think there's also this like fallacy that almost I've had, that like, I had one experience at a startup and I thought it would have to be exactly the same at mine, and it's not, right? It's a different group of people, it's a different product, it's a different mission. So things change. So look, I think the more experiences you have in life, the more capable you are to do bigger things probably, right? So, but everyone should take their path. I think there's a lot of value though to see how it's done at least one other place, right?
What worries me sometimes is maybe they're not really realistic, expectations of what entrepreneurship is actually really about. I mean, the famous roller coaster, yes, it is, but I don't know. Now for younger generations, let's say, the Gen Zs, because I'm becoming 35 this year, the Gen Zs, they also kind of, would like to have the work-life balance also in their life. Tell me about it. I mean, did you have work-life balance when you were working for TransferWise? Was it a thing for you?
I mean, I don't know. I never use that term, so I don't really know what it means. But like, I mean, I think like I always like think a lot about what I'm doing. So for me, like I'm always like, I always do things that I care a lot about. So like, even when I was working at TransferWise or even the trading firm, I was always thinking about, what we're trying to do and why and how to do it, right? So I guess I'm always solving that problem, and it's the same with Plum, right? Obviously. So work and life merge a bit. I don't know if that's good or bad, but if you like what you do, I think it's it's another way you grow, right, as an individual, right? So I mean, if you're an employee, fine, I get it. You might want work-life balance, and something ends and something else begins. Entrepreneurship is definitely not that. I think it's really hard to have it like that. But look, as the organization grows and you have more people that you can really rely on, there are ways for you to relax more. But at the same time, there's more at stake every time, right, as you get bigger. So at the same time, it's difficult.
Did you use the word burnout at some point in your life? Were afraid that you might burn out? Because, this is then the shadow of not, I don't know, thinking too much about the business, maybe. Look,
I haven't used it.
It's good.
Yet, who knows?
Oh, come on.
Yeah. No, I haven't used it, I think, So I can see how it can happen, but people need to know what they need, right, to make them happy and,
How do you switch off? Because I'm actually convinced that you probably also have your life hacks and you're not working from 6:30 in the morning till the late evening, or at least I hope so.
Yeah.
What is your strategy here? How do you maintain yourself healthy and maybe in good shape and also optimistic about the future, able to think big? Otherwise, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think long hours aren't the solution to build a good company, right? So when I work, I mean, I'm always thinking about it, but when I work, it's like I'm quite intense. I'm like, I'm doing the stuff, and I'm not like sitting around and chatting. Like, I mean, I'm either talking to someone or working on I don't know, some thinking about stuff. So that's what I do when I'm working. So I leave the office or things around 6, 7 even, right? But from the moment I wake up, I'm thinking about it till the moment I go to sleep. But I make sure to like leave the office or leave the laptop, right? Around 6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And look, I mean, for me, I mean, as of late, I mean, I know that like, I try to like do some form of exercise in the morning because if I do it in the evening, I won't, right? And then it's, making sure you have like, friends, family around that you enjoy hanging out with, drinking, eating, cooking, yeah.
Very, very Greek style.
Very Greek style, yeah. Barbecues and stuff like that, yeah.
We actually enjoyed it exactly yesterday. It wasn't planned. We were hungry already at 6:30, so the restaurant was empty. But then at some point it got so crowded and there was the live music, and I started appreciating, this kind of Greek attitude to life, that when you enjoy like full. Also full.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Do you do your vacations also in Greece?
This year I will. This year I will, which I think is a bit too much. But it's hard to compete with the Greek islands, and I like the sea a lot. I like swimming, so yeah.
Cool. By the way, so if you have to apply the thinking big, maybe not to your business but to your life, what is your biggest ambition?
My biggest ambition.
From today's perspective, of course, at some point it might change, but yeah.
Well, look, I think the I think the ambition is like to kind of like we talked about work-life balance, and I'm going to use the word balance, but I mean the ambition is to live like kind of well and have like do meaningful, impactful things, I think, right? So I think it's have like a good life and also like do things that you think matter and you feel part through them. You're also growing, right? Because you do grow a lot, right? When you push yourself and like you like for me, like now we're 160 people. It's like different, right? You got to change as an individual, right? So I think it's quite an interesting journey to go through.
Who do you go to when you feel like you need to grow, you need to learn, that you don't know what? Do you have mentors? Do you have friends? Because I think and I heard that from many people in your position, that as a CEO, you can't really also talk to your team. Sometimes you need to talk to a peer who is in a similar situation. How do you do that?
I know. I think a lot of it is with friends that run businesses, right? You talk to them quite a bit. You talk to friends of yours that might not be in the business, but they know you very well, right? That might do something completely different. But yeah, I don't have like an official mentor. I think it's useful. I've thought of looking for one, but I've failed to like put enough effort into it. But yeah, you find people that have been through the same stuff, and you end up becoming friends with them because it's quite unique. And it's very interesting, when you can read about all those stuff, I think in a book, in a business book. But then when you experience it yourself, it's like always reinventing warm water, and then you catch yourself in all those, mistakes that the founders before you did, and they said, okay, don't do it like this, and then you're actually doing it, but at least you are aware. It's you need to experience things. It's hard to read a book and understand exactly what it means in a way, and be able to, I'm just going to replicate the book, for sure.
It's been a real pleasure, having you here in the podcast. For me, sometimes it's very important to have this personal touch to the founders, and I hope that we can also give it to our audience through the podcast, because then you read the news and then you see all those successful people, but you, without understanding their history and their biography and how they grew, sometimes you would say, well, of course he did it. I mean, he went to Harvard, and probably he was also supported by so many other people and so on and so forth. But in reality, doing what you're doing, it takes, I think, a certain mindset.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's a mind, it's not a, I agree. Anyway, I have a lot of friends at Harvard. They all have like a bunch. I don't think Harvard is a real, reason why, you become at all successful, right? I mean, to get there, you need to be. It's always the same mindset that, helps you through your life, right? So it is that mindset, right? The stuff that you do are just products of like you being kind of who you are. It's not like those things enable you in a way that is a disadvantage to other people.
No, you wrapped it up very, very, very beautifully. Thank you so much.
Okay, and thank you.
I wish you a wonderful vacation this time in Greece.
I will have one.
Do you have a favorite island?
I really like Sifnos and Serifos.
Okay, because I guess now people will be actually curious about what to do with their summer.
That's where you go.
Thank you so much, Victor.
Good. Thank you.
In the next episode of the Recursive podcast, we meet with the managing director of Bosch Engineering Center in Sofia, Thomas Metz.
Kind of a traffic jam pilot. If you're driving here on Carigradsko Chaussee, you push the button and your car is more or less following the other cars, keeping the lane, maybe even overtaking other cars and so on. That's already very, very close to automated driving, but still there is a driver. From time to time, he has to hold the wheel. This stuff, according to recent researches, will be by 2025 in over 70% of all cars. Maybe not such a huge function, maybe just a little function helping the driver to keep the lane, and function of not falling asleep and so on. So these pieces of assisted automated driving, we will very, very soon everywhere. And from what we talked about before, the chances that it's coming from Bosch are very, very high. And chances that also our colleagues here in Sofia were doing it are getting bigger year by year.
Wow, okay.
The second thing, this revolutionary thing, you jump in a robo shuttle, there is no driver, it brings you from A to B.
Is this happening? I'm looking forward to that, actually.
It is happening. It is happening, yeah. From my point of view, this is still the pure gold.
Yes.
Why? Because the more we automate, the more we take the driver out of this whole system, the safer it gets. We have up to, depending on which study you look, between 20 and 50 million people per year hurt in traffic situations.
And if you are just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.